One. Hello, everyone. This is Coach D with the Shift Method Podcast. Hope y'all are having a wonderful day. Have an awesome guest on today. We're going to talk about some cool nuances on the squat and the deadlift and go into a little bit of his fitness background. This is a guy I actually had the pleasure to meet just a couple weeks ago, but hit it off pretty well. He's an amazing guy, has some really cool experiences, and that is Kevin. Kevin, can you please introduce yourself briefly to the people?
Hi, I'm Kevin. End of podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
Roll credits.
Roll credits. I'm Kevin Mullins. I'm a fitness professional of almost 14 years now. I'm like a day or two away from hitting 14 years in the game, as they say. I've been very fortunate. I've trained a lot. I worked at Sports Club LA, EQUINOX, Anatomy, doing 1,000, 1,500 type session years. And got a lot of experience at a young age. I had an opportunity to join the writing, presenting, teaching circuit about 5 years ago, and have been doing a lot of that in addition to still seeing some private clients and was consulting with various fitness brands and businesses on how they can operate at a higher level, or as I like to call it, sales without the sketchy. Just like, how do you deliver a better product and avoid coming off like a used car salesman? Because that's not what we do.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. And you said you're coming up on your 14-year anniversary. Do you know like what month or when that is exactly?
Yeah, it's December of 2008.
That's my anniversary is December. It's coming up too. Coming up on
There
seven
you
years.
go.
Yes, sir.
That's
Very
great.
cool.
Yeah, I got certified in '08. I
Okay.
still remember that. I got a desk job at a gym, and the guy liked me. He was like, "Hey, I can get you a discount for ISSA." And at the time, I was a Kines major in college, but I didn't know if it was like, how do you go about that? You're 19, 20, you have no
Yep.
idea what you're doing. And I got certified and got a job near college, and the rest is holy crap history. It's
Yeah,
crazy
man.
sometimes when you think about that. Not to go on an early tangent, but as I get older, I can't help but consider the butterfly effect just a little bit. It's like I was like, yeah, sure, I'll get certified. 14 years later, here I am. It's just I could have been lazy, right? I could have been like any other 19-year-old and like wanted to log into Call of Duty or like
Yeah.
do whatever, but I chose to do it, and look at the life.
See, look at the parallels, man. I got certified when I was 18, not a couple weeks, if not a couple of days before my 19th birthday, if I'm getting that
Mm-hmm.
right. And it was the same thing. Like I was in exercise science and I was like, just got a job at the rec center at the college in the gym. And I'm like, I think I want to do personal training, something fitness related. And it's like, you take that exam, that piece of paper gets printed out with your exam score. You're like having a panic attack going to read it. And who knows what would have happened if it I didn't pass the first time the other way. So, hey man, we're here now, right?
Yeah, we're here now doing good work, serving people, but it is just crazy when you think like, yeah, I had changed my major too. I was an architecture major at
Oh
first.
wow. Okay.
Uh, Mainly because I'll be completely honest about it, is I played like a ton of Sims growing up. I was like, I love building the houses. If architecture is anything like that, I'm gonna have a great life. And then I realized
Exactly.
there's actually math and safety regulations. I was like, nope, 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 nope.
Wait, I can't have a house with only three walls? What's up with that?
Right? Yeah.
Oh man. Well, thanks, man, for giving us introduction. I didn't that's I like I said, I only known Kevin for a couple of weeks now. And I know a little bit about his strength conditioning side, but didn't know he get to do all that awesome stuff. So that's really cool having that unique fitness background. Before we get
Mm-hmm.
into some of our main topics on the squat and the deadlift, because that was a presentation that he did for us at the summit where I met him. Some really cool like nuances on the setup and the execution of lifts. I always like to get to know people's background in fitness specifically. So,
Mm-hmm.
how exactly did you? I know you mentioned having architecture first and hopping to fitness, but how did you get into fitness in general as a person? And then what made you decide to do it as a profession?
So, much to his chagrin, I did not really work out in high school. I played some sports. I got cut from teams. I was just like mediocre Kevin. I was just a kid. I didn't have a lot of self conviction, and I think with that comes a lack of passion, right? Uh, and if it's a gift and a curse, but my whole life I've always been pretty good at everything I try, but never great.
Hmm.
Until I found teaching and presenting and speaking that I tend to be decent at. But everything else, like pick up a tennis racket. Oh, I'm not horrible. And so as a result, I was able to kind of skate by in my younger years. And I remember graduating high school, never really had much more than a few girlfriends, was definitely never the type to be seen with the hotties. And I went on a cruise. I went on a cruise with a friend and his cousin. And I don't even talk to the friend anymore. Bad story there. But the the cousin was like, dude, you got to get in really good shape and everybody will notice you. And for some reason, that like activated me. And I got home and I was never fat. Like, that's the thing is so many fitness professionals have these like awesome origin stories. They had like a disease or an injury
Yep.
or they were super overweight. I was just like average. Just put me in the background of a photo and I disappear. Put me in the front of the photo and I disappeared. What has always set me apart was my brain, my creativity, sure, but like the physical attributes of me were very nonchalant. So I don't have like some crazy coming of fitness story, but I just started working out and I started to like it. I got a job selling supplements at GNC. But what was good is, I mean, you know, every now and again you pat at your pocket by knowing what supplements to push. But I always tried to be honest. I learned a lot about nutrition and supplements just by working there. And then I changed my major, which to this day, I don't think my dad can still pronounce my major. It's like Kinisalala.
What do you do? What is that thing?
Yeah.
Gotcha. And are you originally from Florida or where did you grow up?
I am a Maryland born and raised boy. I've only been in Miami now a year and a half. Let's just call it.
Gotcha. And what made you make the move? Was it a particular the job that you're in currently?
In a previous life, I was married to someone, and we had made a mutual decision to move down here together to get away from the pandemic and the rules and the regulations, and in our minds, to have a beach year before maybe children and other things, and then certain missteps by someone led to a whole revival of me down here, minus her. So,
gotcha. Hey, that person lost, man. That beautiful face now on the open market. So, or I'm not sure the open market, but it's available for the viewers to see at least. So
yeah, it's unwedded. It's unwedded.
Awesome, man. Well, we're happy to have you down here. We're always happy to have people come down to the Sunshine State. So glad that you made your way down, regardless of the situation.
Yeah, it's amazing because to kind of go back to the origins of me, I was in DC for years working for EQUINOX and Sports Club A, which was purchased by EQUINOX. It's really where I got my training start, if you will, and really, really built who I am. A lot of great mentors, a lot of great years of tons of sessions, amazing clients. But there at times, because of my personality, I was very anti-DC. So I quickly became a big fish in a small pond in the sense of very few people can match my energy and output level at all times. And so when I moved to Florida, at first I was like, oh shit, I'm in the swimming pool now. Like I am in the ocean. Everybody here is jacked and tan and loud and energetic and no Spanish and reggaeton.
And got blue teeth. Their teeth are so white they're blue.
Yeah. And then I'm here showing up gringo blanco and just winging it. But it's worked out. And honestly, I feel more at home in the career in Florida because so much of my network is here that it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's a fitness hotspot, man. It's a blessing and a curse, right? There's the oversaturation issue, but I think if we all treat each other as like friends and people who can like leverage each other, there's plenty of people to help out. So I don't see it as like a negative,
Absolutely.
although it can seem that way at first, I feel like.
Yeah, I've long been saying that our number one competitor in fitness, never each other. It's dopamine. It's Netflix. It's Taco Tuesdays. It's
That's a good
video
point.
games. It's sleeping in late. Like, yeah, when you get down to it, when somebody's really into working out or has a specific need or desire of the environment, it might get a little edgy between trainer to trainer, brand to brand. By and large, in a country with 76, I think, percent of the population being overweight, there's more than enough clients to go around. So let's stop trying to tear each other down or being in direct competition and instead say, they're great and we're great too. Let me show you why we're great. And if you think they're great and they fit you better, then I'm happy for you. just remember what we did for you. And if someone you think fits us, we'd love to have them. And it's like, it's the classic analogy of a rising tide, right, raises all ships, right? So it's why do we have to bury each other so much?
Absolutely. I had a mentor, and he had many great quotes, this man, but one of them is, I can help everyone, but I'm not for everyone. So it's just like, hey, people are going to find their flavor of coach. And like, if you come to me and it works, awesome. If you come to me and it doesn't, I hope you get the help that like matches your personality and your style, and there'll be someone out there for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like even when I was at Anatomy, I had 2 clients leave me to work with someone else, even though possibly I may have been the more tactically skilled and experienced coach, but I'm not a super like spiritual oneness with the universe. I'm just now leaning into understanding, different energies and vibes and all that. And even then I'm just like at the appetizer. I'm not looking at the menu yet. But there are some people in South Florida, as you know, that are very into this sort of Reiki and spirituality.
Oh, yes.
And so my coaching style being a little bit punchier, I don't want to say broy, but like somewhere between bro, intellect, and almost military with how I like to hammer my cues. Some people it doesn't work for. So I love that quote by your mentor. I can help everyone, but I may not be for everyone. That's so accurate.
Yeah. So you got the knowledge, but you're saying you can't align my chakras, is what you're saying, at least not yet.
No, I mean, the way I align my chakras is usually two whiskeys and a deadlift. Either I'm going to get out of line or in line, but either way, something's on the line.
I love it, man. And I definitely at some point would like to go way into detail about your background, because I remember when Anatomy first came out, I read about it. Sounded like a really cool place. So definitely would like to talk to you in the future about all those details. But
absolutely,
for sure, want to get into the main things we want to talk about, kind of what you presented to me on, which I thought was so cool. And that's kind of like the ins and outs of the squat and the deadlift. So kind of the main things that and I would say you presented the information very well. Some of it, of course, refresh, like, hey, squat, working the quads, this plane of motion, etc. But I really like kind of like your nuances on things like the setup and something like the executions of the lift. So can you kind of just like go over however you want to attack it, like your philosophy on like the squat and like how you kind of coach it at a higher level?
Yeah. So with the squat, especially, it all has to start with the idea that everyone on earth who has access to movement in their legs, because there are some who do not, who has access to movement in their legs can squat. And that even includes individuals who may be partially paralyzed or dealing with neurological conditions. Their squat may not be standing up. They may have to lie on their back and have a person manually move their knees through flexion and extension, move their hips through flexion and extension. But technically, if we get in the weeds, it is still a squat pattern because you're linking together triple flexion and then, flexion minus the plantar flexion at the end, like triple extension. So it has to start, all coaching has to start with everybody can squat. So as a coach, when I meet someone, I already know I'm going to squat you. How I go about that is going to be based on a couple of variables. My biggest variables are, and this is one that a lot of coaches don't like to talk about because people are upset when you talk about body shape and size. But if you come to me and you look like you got a little muscle mass on you, you look like you've seen a gym before, I'm going to assume at the very least you're going to goblet squat to potentially front rack squat pretty well, maybe with some coaching cues. But the fact that you got some muscle masses on you tells me, okay, we got some trainability here. If you don't, then I'm going to just say, okay, now what pattern do I think is going to work for you? Which then goes to my next question. Are you weak and underdeveloped, or are you overweight and potentially developed, but with a lack of coordination and a lack of control because so much dead weight, aka body fat, is on you? If it's the latter, instantly TRX squat. I'm going to groove the out of that pattern. I might superset it with some other stuff to create some burn. I'm not going to really worry about perfect squat form until I drop some pounds off you, simply because I know the fat's making an impact on how you move. If it's the underdeveloped, I'm probably going to start with a TRX to the body weight, quickly to a goblet to a box. Boom. So before you get into technique, you got to know what type of squat am I doing? And so that's why I'm kind of walking through this. And then from there, I would say 80% of the clients I train have never barbell back squatted with me, unless it was on a Smith machine in a more apartment gym, hotel-y gym setup where I didn't have access to more load and I just had to bite the bullet and say, if I want to get anything more than this 50-pound dumbbell, I'm going to have to load you up, because the barbell is a specialty device. And to the point of how you enjoyed the execution is, I'll quiz you now. What was the thing I said is the first consideration in the back squat?
And on the spot. It
Uh-huh.
was it the hands?
Exactly.
Hey, let's go.
You got it, ladies and gentlemen.
There
That's
we
how you know
go.
you made your impact as a coach. Um, but it's hands. And here's why. The bar is in the rack. And if I grab the bar with bad hand position, everything once I back out of the rack is going to be based off that not so comfortable bar position on my back. And so one of the things I do is I just have my clients stand next to the bar once I have it at the appropriate height. Uh, for those listening, appropriate height is really collarbone, not top of shoulder. The mistake we make is we think, oh, yeah, it's on line with your traps, but they still have to sort of get up on their tippy toes to get under and scoop the weight off the pins. Versus if you get like high clavicle, mid to low clavicle, high sternum, you're going to have to squat under the bar a little bit, which is actually ideal because all you're doing is standing straight up once you have it. From there, the hands should be slightly wider than shoulder width. So as I did with you guys on the drill, arms go out like a zombie, turn it over, middle fingers where they are on the bar. You take the width of your index finger and thumb, so the L, like it's Smash Mouth, shape of the L on your forehead, space out that much more. So you give yourself your two L's, and then that's your position. Thumb then goes over top of the bar to create a wrist lock so that you're not going into wrist extension as you squat. I find that most of my clients who struggle with that squat in the barbell, assuming their ankles and knees are good, I look at their hands. I'm like, yep, they're bending their wrist and now their body's doing weird things.
Which makes
So
complete
hands go
sense.
over
That's
top.
controlling the load, which controls your mechanics from
Yeah.
there on out.
And ultimately, with any of the barbell lifts, you want to try to be one with the bar, right? You want to minimize any energy leaks. You want to minimize any loss of kinetic and potential energy. And when that wrist goes, you just have a leak in the system because then your elbows will adjust. Then your shoulders are going to pull back, and then you're going to rooster chest it, and then your chin's going to look up. Then you're going to minimize your depth, which is going to pull on your lower back, and then you're going to say, I hate squats. Squats aren't for me. Little do you know, it was simply your hand position. So then thumbs are over the bar, and I'm a big believer in trying to make the bar frown. So I want to see the elbows drive into the hips. I want you to try to bend that bar around your body. Once you stand up, you're racked. From there, it becomes foot position. Now, one of the certifications I travel and teach, get PPSC, Pain-Free Performance Specialist Certification, we actually do a full hip scour and help people discover their actual bony anatomy, where their femoral head sits in the acetabular junction most happily. And it blows people away. Just this past weekend in Dallas, I had someone and she said, I squat with pain. I can't get below like even 45 degrees. We got her below parallel. She was still having some low back pain from a previous injury, but the depth she got, and now that she's working with some tension, she's happy. So we know that we can find a super optimal foot position for you. But, the sort of redneck engineering version of it would be without the bar, you jump up pretty much as high as you can. And then whatever stance your feet land in to catch your weight, that's your width or your abduction. And then I like to think, take your toes, give them 2 to 3 inches. And I like to give people more space and let them prove to me that their toes can come back in. From there, set the feet, then brace. It's all about that brace. So it's going to be that big Valsalva maneuver, that big breath. Try to expand. I like to say be a Santa Claus, not a supermodel. So you want a big round belly. And like I say, breathe like a fish. I use all these crazy cues to try to get people to think about breathing past their lungs. And then you bite down on that. You lock that pressure in, hands pull down on the bar. And then as you cadence down, I'd argue with any of the listeners, if you feel a squat in your back, it's because your butt's going back first instead of down. Mm-hmm. And the first effort in a squat is actually straight down. People forget that the human body is this really intelligent machine. that will adjust for you. And so if you start thinking sink straight down, your hips will naturally sit back once you reach about 45-50% of the lift's depth. And then you'll just sit into this amazing stack. The knees drive out over the toe angle, keep that brace, keep it tight, and then drive through the floor, push the floor away, spread the floor at the same time. Keep bending the bar, stand tall, lock out them glutes, smile and wave for the camera.
I love it. And a lot of gems there, man. The first part, taking the individual as they are with their body composition or their, anatomy as they will, and starting them at a level that is comfortable for them, then progressing them. What I always tell people is you don't have to do a barbell back squat. I'm biased because I like them a lot. And I like the axial load and the unique benefit that's provided there. But not everyone has to back squat. But you probably should. It would be in your best interest to do some kind of squat, because I always laugh. And when I hear, it's still funny, I still hear doctors tell people, or people tell me, like, I've been told to never squat again. It's like, you squat every day. You sit down on a toilet, you bend over and pick things up. Like, there's no escaping squatting. It's, you can run away from squatting in the gym, sure. But if you want to have good carryover for your life, for the average client, some kind of squat, TRX, goblet, front, suitcase carry, barbell back squat, whatever, it's going to benefit you to do something. So I like that you make that distinction, that not everyone has to do it, but some squat is going to be beneficial.
Yeah, it absolutely pains me to think that on one side of the spectrum, we have these bros out there. I'm just going to throw the bros under the bus, where everything's barbell, everything's heavy, just grinding people into the ground until they get hurt, or they just don't want to do it anymore because it's suffering over a period of time. And then the trainer typically blames them. Oh, they just don't have it. They don't want it bad enough. Like, no, they don't want to be on the cover of Men's Health like you do. They just want to be a little less fat, have slightly better sex. They want to be able to not hurt when they get out of the shower. Like, they want a life.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, you have these, and I'm just going to call them what they are. They're pricks. Any doctor who says you can't is not a good doctor, in my opinion.
Yep.
Period.
I agree.
To tell someone what they can't do is to literally start to shut down one of the things that makes us the species that we are.
Yes.
And I welcome any listeners that are doctors. You want to debate this with me? We'll do our own little, we'll have Damien host us and we'll argue with each other. But, if you're saying you can't drink when you're taking an antidepressant, okay, cool, got that. Because there's a chemical thing.
That's fair.
But we're talking about physiology. Physiology. You can't bend your knees anymore. Can they bend their knees? Yes. Should they? Yes, because when you don't use it, you lose it. And that's a fact that is undeniable. And so the scary part is that people trust their doctors because they wear white coats and they've got all these medical degrees and they're working at the hospital or the clinic. And so you would want to trust a person like that to do good by you. And you put this trust in them, and then they end up letting you down with absolutely asinine and incorrect recommendations.
Yeah.
If a doctor said, hey, listen, I know you're a big gym goer, but since this hip replacement, I don't want you trying to squat that 225 to parallel anymore. You're locked at about 70 degrees of that right hip. If you can get the 65, unload it, that's awesome. But listen, we do not want to get you down to, a 90-degree position. That's different. That's specificity. Saying, listen, live your life. Probably don't try to back squat max effort anymore. But that's not what they're doing.
Totally agree. And I also really liked, and this is something that I've been thinking about for a while, and it just so happened that part of your conversation included it, and you got to look at my squat form, and you actually did the thing that I've been working on for the last almost a year, which is a big thing that I'm realizing. And I'm going to say this is going to be part of like one of the new trends in fitness, I'll call it, right? You heard it here first in October of 2022. A big change in fitness is going to be the individualization of exercise per person. So what I mean by that, I think it's kind of dying down a little bit, but I think for a while, and this is a whole other conversation, for a while, it was the very like pure biomechanist like standpoint. It's like the squat, like the supple leopard side. Again, no disrespect to the gentleman. His name eludes me at the moment. Very brilliant man. I've read most of the book, has some cool points in it, but on some of the stuff I will disagree, where it's like your feet have to be more or less straight ahead. Your knees have to go straight in line. There can be no deviation whatsoever, and everyone should and can squat like that. I don't agree with that. Everyone's built a little bit differently. 90% of the population has a leg length discrepancy. Most people are one side dominant over the other, and that is by design and normal. So to expect everyone to have what I would consider a robotic, which we are not, we're a biological adaptive organism. Our squat and the way that we position our body is going to be unique to the person. So you talking about that trip to Dallas, or even when you were with me, how when I squat or do leg press, I will naturally have, if you're looking at my hands right now to represent my feet, my left foot is going to be a little bit higher and a little bit more externally rotated. That has always been the case my entire life. My right leg has always had a little bit more mobility, and it was exaggerated when I had a hamstring injury back in undergrad, where just, I do I have good range of motion in my squat. I have okay flexibility for my size. And that's just where my body's comfortable, produces the most force, and feels the happiest when I do any kind of lower body squat based movement. But to tell someone like, no, you can't do that. You have to be in this perfect, hip distance squat with and your toes at the point straight ahead. It's like, okay, bro, like I could do all the static stretching in the world and all the drilling of it. I'm not going past 45 degrees. Like it's not happening. And you point out, you're like, oh, it looks like you might have had something go on, or something with your left side of your body seems to be more dominant, maybe in favor of this. I'm like, you're absolutely right. And that's where I find myself most comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was one of those things. And when you're teaching a seminar like that, and then you see some stuff that doesn't match your material, I was like, I need to fix this on him because I can see it, but I also am not even going into the weeds of asymmetries and why that's not the end of the world. So I think I said something. I was like, guys, if you want to know about this, ask me after, but watch this.
Yes.
But yeah, I think, it always takes me back to that old, I think it was like a political cartoon meant to be about like socioeconomic class, but it was like a monkey, a zebra, and like a fish. It was like first one to climb the tree gets the money. And it's just this idea that 8 point whatever billion people can all do the same movement the same way when we all got different hand sizes, jaw sizes, eye colors, it just, some people like Justin Bieber, other people want to punch Justin Bieber. Like the human species is radically, overwhelmingly different. So how can anyone actually feel comfortable making a claim of standardization? It's baffling to me. And I'm not even getting in the weeds of biomechanics, just at the highest possible like contemplation level.
Yeah.
How could you possibly say that every species, or I'm sorry, every person of a species should be identical?
No, it's so silly. And it's kind of like you said, there's like two ends of the extremes. It's like everyone needs to squat this way, and it's like you can do whatever you want. It's like there are ground rules. Like for a back squat, for the purpose of like just the compound lift itself, you want your feet flat. You generally want the bar to be in line with the midfoot. You want your chest to be generally more vertical than a deadlift, right? It's not always going to be perfectly aligned with the shins. That would be ideal, but it doesn't always work that way.
And but that's the goal, is that tibial angle, though.
Exactly.
You definitely want the tibial to torso relationship.
But. Exactly. And you want to have, your hands controlled and the bar to be stable. Like for the most part, if you check off those things and you reinforce some other cues or errors that you might see, like knee cave, excessive knee cave, etc., like let the person with some coaching guidance find the place where they feel strongest, less aches and pains if they're having any, and they can produce, the most force, and like drill that pattern. That is probably
especially when their goal is not to compete on a powerlifting platform.
Exactly.
Right. If their goal is, I just trust you to get me in better shape and live a stronger, better life, then force feeding a specific dogmatic stance or approach is just utterly asinine and unforgivable, if you ask me.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, man. I love it.
Yeah.
Anything else on the squat before we move on?
I think the one big one that we talked at, I didn't go into front squat enough there, but I mean, I only had 60 minutes to cover squat, deadlift. So the biggest mistake people make with a front squat in true rack position is they don't press on the bar. They just dead load the bar onto their body. But if you stay active through your hands, it helps keep your elbows up, which then makes the whole squat significantly easier. If you remember the model I had with the front squat, he like sunk at the bottom, and I said, all right, I want you to press the bar. don't actually press the bar, because he had some meaty shoulders. He might have actually been able to press that. But I was like, press against it like you're trying to start an overhead press. And then all of a sudden his torso was just like,
I see.
So I
Because your
think the one
body
thing
will
with
go into
fronts,
like that natural extension, kind of almost like when you're going to initiate a shoulder press.
yeah. So if a person has good T-spine extension, healthy T-spine extension, and then you go to initiate a overhead press, that's the base of it, right? The T-spine is like the dinner table that serves the meal that is overhead anything. And so having that T-spine and extension, and then having the scaps actually driving into a little bit of upward rotation, very mild, but that little bit of upward rotation just keeps everything locked where it should be, so that you're not hanging out just on your clavicles or bending your fingers half to hell. And then I think the biggest one with front squat is knowing you're going to probably want to use a little bit more turnout and let your knees really drive out, so you sit right in the middle. More than a back squat, you have less of a lever. You're just dropping and popping. So, I think I actually recommend a lot of back squatters to go on like a 3-month front squat only cycle, and then bring them back to the back squat, and just laugh as they 50, 60, 75 pound PR.
Damn.
Because all of them, because all the core and quad dominant demands, as well as glute, right? Like the front squat, in theory, you should be able to sit deeper. In theory, not everybody lives up to theory, which is going to be more glute because the hip is in a pre-contract. So, like, people need to front squat more. And then on your goblet squat, if you're holding a kettlebell, pull the kettlebell apart. Don't be quiet up top. If it's a dumbbell, squeeze the dumbbell. If it's a kettlebell, pull it apart.
Gotcha. I like that tip because I've done front squats before, but I've never really tried that cue of I usually, like you said, just kind of be lazy at the top and like just kind of hold it. Or if I'm using straps, I kind of just hold the straps lazily. But if I do front squats next time, I'm going to try that out.
Well, think about it this way, right? And this goes for every compound lift. Does the bench press only work the packs?
No, of course not.
If done correctly.
If done correctly, no.
Exactly. Like I've had a hamstring cramp benching heavy. So it's just understanding that if I want to squat well, I don't want any part of my body off taking a vacation day. And so
that makes sense.
To truly maximize it, can I, let's say I was doing a WOD at downtown, strength and conditioning or something. Sure. I might just pop in and get her done because it's a, sub max weight. But if I'm actually starting to push some LBs and I really want my technique tight, obviously I want everything from my middle finger to the underside of my manhood firing at once, because I want to get it all into the lift, right? Like I need maximum effort.
Yes.
Dead pull, maximum effort.
That's right. We're recruiting every single inch of our body. I love it. All right. So we got some cool stuff, some nuances on the squat with the setup, the initiation, actually some cool little tips for the front squat as well. Now I want to kind of transition into the deadlift. So same kind of thing, then however you want to attack it, from the setup, maybe talk a little about sumo and conventional if you want, and kind of like the execution and some tips for the people.
So this is where I can ruffle the world a little bit. So do you remember what I said the most important thing to know in your deadlift setup was? What was the first step?
It's really quizzing me today. First step.
I'll give you a hint. You already said it.
Whether you should do sumo or conventional?
Yeah, but what dictates that?
There's a lot of things. Your anatomy, your leg length is a big one. Relation to your torso, arm length is also going to help. And don't remember the other ones that you mentioned.
Yeah, so the biggest one here is, and this is where a lot of coaches will snap back at me until I prove my point, is the hands once again.
The hands again. Damn.
Yeah, because I think when we start with feet, and to be clear, I'm not talking competing lifts, because people spend years and years and years refining the exact stance that they can PR on a platform. So I want to caveat this conversation is I'm teaching someone's dad or mom to deadlift, or their best friend to deadlift, not necessarily taking a friend like mine, Tasha Whalen, who's a competitive female powerlifter, who has like a very oiled down stance, almost like a baseball player in their batting stance. So I just want to make sure that caveat's there. So with that in mind, the hands are my starting point for my clients, because If I've made the determination that they're going to pull conventional or sumo, I need to know where their hands are going to contact the bar so that I can set them up in the best possible relationship between their hand position and bar position. What you'll often see, here's an amazing example, people who have seen sumo deadlifts, their feet will, by all in purposes, be in the right position, but then their hands are like 2 inches apart. And they wonder why they're fighting the bar on the way up, and it's because too much load deviation, they're not able to create any tension outwards. And so, or you see somebody like set up sumo and still try to get their hands outside of their shins, which is just disastrous. And so ultimately, I want to know, how do you want to address this bar? How am I going to make you address this bar? So for me, sumo, when I see femurs that look about 1.5, I'm not breaking out a measuring tape every time. But if it appears that by and large, your femur is about 1.5 the length of your tibia, your lower leg, I'm going to start you in sumo and then let you earn your way to conventional. That's not to say you're never going to pull conventional, but especially if I'm teaching you day one, I'm going to try to put you in winning positions. And then if you're also, even if your legs are roughly the same, whatever, if you're just one of those people whose like nipples are on your hips, you have no abdomen, it's just like clavicle, sternum, belly button, feet. So if you have no torso, same thing, sumo position. If you're stacky like me, it's conventional. Like all my limbs are pretty much balanced in length, so I can do either, but I tend to pull heavier conventional.
Gotcha.
Nonetheless, dictate that hand position. Once again, I want it somewhere in that shoulder pocket. So for conventional, I want it directly below that acromion process. I want straight line coming down out of the body so that I have no snatchy grip, no internal rotation prior to the lift. I want it straight down. With sumo, I want it straight down and slightly out because I want to be able to create a situation where a person drives their elbow into their inner thigh at the very bottom. They're going to lose that point of contact pretty quick, but I want them to think elbows to thighs, thighs out, right, to create more glute tension at the bottom. So the hands, strong grip, not false gripping this. Thumbs definitely go under. If a person has to go over under, it's important to switch every set or every rep if possible. I'm honestly not against straps unless you want to compete in powerlifting. Like, I'd rather you use straps and never put that biceps tendon at risk when you're just Dave from accounting than worry about whether or not you're tough and can grab 380 double overhand. Then from there, it's going to be foot position, and that foot position conventional. I want to see people in slightly narrower than their jump position, minimal turnout, but the only turnout I want is on whatever, and this is kind of unique to me, whatever leg that they would want in front of them in a sprint. So whatever your lead leg would be. I'm going to give that the tiniest bit of turnout because in theory, that's your dominant leg, and you might have a little bit more space in that joint. So you might have somebody mostly normal, but then just the slightest little turnout on that dominant side. From there, build your tension by filling up your air, drive your ass to the ceiling, actually. And then think about like a boat winch cranking down a sail, trying to take that ass high and then crank it down low. And then once your hips get down roughly to parallel, regardless of which form you're taking, I want you to think about trying to bend the bar around your body. And then I want you to think about your knees following that same track. And then one more big ass breath. And then I always teach clients, imagine the bar is linked to your chin. And it's one of my best cues for keeping torso length. It's like that bar is on your chin. So like let your chin lead with your hands. And then the next thing you know, power deadlift. I think the other thing that people always got to remember is as the weight crosses, I think it's 1.5 times your body weight, the amount that you can lean back prior to the lift goes up pretty notably. As long as you can keep full foot on the ground, leaning back into your hips is going to make that deadlift feel like butter compared to a grind. For me, that was probably the one cue took me the longest to master in my own personal journey, was knowing that I could actually kind of get back instead of staying over top of the bar as if it were a power clean.
I like that. With the sumo, and I wanted to get your opinion on this because this is something I've learned. I don't remember if I learned it in class or just online, but it's something that I've used with clients before. I do use anatomy. I do use, other cues like you mentioned, like position and comfortability. But one that I also found was very helpful is if you get into, and I made a post about this, I think last week, if you get into a conventional stance and everything is right, like your foot placement looks good, your hands are in a good spot, and you bring your shins to the bar and you're ready to initiate the lift, and your hips are higher than your shoulders, it might be a good indicator that a sumo stance might be good for you. Would you say that's a fair cue to give?
I would want to see what happens if I coached a little bit of cranking, right? Like a lot of people don't know what it's like to crank back and down in a
Right.
conventional deadlift. Like it takes a while. That ability to kind of like lose all your tension and get kind of hunchback at Notre Dame and then inhale, sit back, lats drive into depression. Ass is, it's not quite a squat, but you're going that way. And then as the weight lifts the ground, it stabilizes the hip throughout the motion. And so I think that's not a bad reference point at all. I've never personally used it, but anecdotally in my imagination, I feel like that's a good indicator. To me, it's just a little later in the game than I would want to catch that position, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. And you're right. Maybe if I taught him that cue of like leaning back and pulling into tension, maybe their hips drop naturally and find that, oh, you might be good for a conventional stance.
Mm-hmm.
I like
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I think a lot of beginners go with sumo, short range of motion, and it's squattier, right? So there's less of a pure hinge mastery needed, right? To
Yes.
be a good conventional deadlifter, especially when you're younger and newer and you don't have the bone tolerance, right? Because like anybody who ever watches me deadlift really heavy, they'll see that I actually start and maintain a mild thoracic flexion throughout, but it never changes. It just holds throughout the lift. And part of that is you look at an X-ray, and from years of heavy lifting and just being like a thicker guy in general, bony wise, I've built up pretty good tolerance to having my spine in flexion so long as it's not changing. To be clear, T spine, not lumbar spine. But if for a beginner, someone who's trying to like master it, they'll go to the sumo because it's squattier. They don't have to sit back as far. It's just really kind of sit, grip, and rip versus learning really where your fulcrums are and where your leverage points are. You know, uh, it's the weirdest feeling when you feel like you've sat back too far and you're like, I'm about to fall backwards, but you also initiated the lift already. And as that bar leaves by just a millimeter, that sensation of falling is gone. And now you're just standing straight up because you have 300, 400, 500 in front of you, pulling you back right.
Yes. That's very cool, man. I like that a lot.
Yeah,
I haven't tried that cue myself either.
it to me, it's the most important cue once we've gotten the obvious, like, any cue is important if it's a problem in the lift, but we have your obvious ones. We don't want somebody looking like a dog shitting in the woods. We don't want people losing all their lat tension. I don't want you looking up. I don't want you looking down. I don't want soft hands, weak body. Like there's a lot of cues for your safety.
Mm-hmm.
But once we really start saying, okay, you get the gist of this, and I actually want to make you good at this, sitting back and down and learning where that leverage point is probably the biggest, followed by learning how to really lock down your lats.
Yeah.
Some people would say squeezing the orange in your armpits is more important. I personally, if I can get your feet and hips in the right position and braced you, even if your lats give up, I can coach that a hair later in the lift.
I like
So,
that. And I
because
also
you can
like,
rack.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just say you can rack pull people to death if they're letting their lats go.
Yeah. And then gradually just lower it over time until it's like, okay, now I finally
Exactly.
got it. But I
Yeah.
also really like that you said how, yeah, the hinge is definitely of like, I use like the 8 primary movement patterns, like Joe talks about, is like you got your
Mm-hmm.
squat, your vertical push, vertical pull, etc. Hinge is a complicated one that takes people a long time because they either start squatting it or they just like don't understand like their back and hip mechanics. They're like, I don't know how to get back here. It's definitely important I try and teach it, but for sure there's times where I'm like, you know what? You're gonna do good with like a hip thrust or maybe like a dumbbell, like minimal RDL, or maybe even like you said, doing some kind of like sumo deadlift that puts you a little bit more kind of like a squat where you can kind of
Mm-hmm.
understand it a little bit better.
Yeah, I think every trainer in the world has a memory of trying to teach someone to hinge. I think it's a
Yeah.
part of the job. It's just a thing we all have to go through. And I think one of the takeaways about teaching people to hinge is you can't use just your words and you
Hmm.
can't just demo it, right? There's a lot of things that you can show people, you can explain it to people, and they start to get it. But the hinge is truly felt. And that's the frustrating part is you can't make your clients feel it.
Yeah.
But once they get a couple reps, it's about grooving the living hell out of it once they do get it and not, not adding intensity too fast. But I think a lot of other lifts, a lot of clients, even if they're not great movers, can intuitively watch you, hear you, and get it. But until you've really been anteriorly pelvic tilt, driving into the deep hip flexion, hamstrings start catching on you, core is on, and you're like, oh, whoa, what is that? Until you feel that, you don't really quite know it.
Yeah. I
And
teach
that's
it.
what frustrates us.
Yes. I teach an ACE prep course at school at FAU. And I always tell my trainers what I found anecdotally, if there's one exercise where tactile cues is like the most important, what I found is deadlift. And where I tell them like, hey, if your client is comfortable with touch, always ask them, right? Don't just go poking your clients on day one. Be like, hey, I'm trying to show you the hinge. Is okay if I gently touch your hip and gently touch your shoulder? What has been very helpful is to actually say like, no, push your hips back and gently let your chest fall
Mm-hmm.
forward. Because some people telling them that they don't understand hips back, chest forward, or point your butt back. That's a joking way I've said to clients before to make them laugh. Like, point your butt back like you're a stripper at the club and it's Tuesday night and you got to make rent. Like some people get that and some people don't. It
Some
doesn't
people
make
were
sense
like,
to them.
why you got to bring up my past like that?
Come on now. Come on.
Um, Now, with that, that's why I love the handcuff hinge. You take a kettlebell, you put it behind their back, like they're under arrest.
Mm-hmm.
Because my shoulders are in this position, I can't really round my T spine.
Ah,
And I just say, press your ass into that bell in your knuckles. And as they push into that, I can coach them up a little bit with knee bend, but the chest takes care of itself. And so you make it a singular command, press into the bell. Where I find most beginner to intermediate client struggles when you're giving them two separate parts of the body to monitor at once.
yes.
And so something like the handcuff hinge is amazing because you literally just say, press your butt into that bell. Keep pushing the bell across the room with your butt cheeks. And it's not going to be perfect. It might be short, but they'll have an upright torso because the hands are in that handcuff position. So I hate dowels because it takes too much management and like, why is my hand up here? But the the handcuff tends to do really well for speeding people through it.
Man, I'm learning all kinds of things today. I do go to the dowel rod, but you're right. There is a definite disconnect when they get the hinge down to then now it's like the bar is going from here to here, and some people do get lost in there. And it's like, no, you just did it perfectly. Just hold it in your hands, and then there's more
Yeah.
coaching that's to go into that. But I'll have to try the handcuff one. That's cool.
Yeah, my progression for that is handcuff hinge, so it's behind the back, and they're just pressing against it. Then I do a heel feed hinge where they hold the kettlebell at top down loading, so it's an RDL esque. And instead of thinking about bringing it straight down, I want them to get the whole kettlebell behind their heels. And
Mm.
so the handcuff keeps them upright torso. This teaches them how to load back, and then I'll take them to a true kettlebell, what we can call some sort of conventional deadlift, and then at that point they usually got it.
I love it, man. I
Keyword being usually.
usually, right? There's always some special cases where it's just like, man, I got to spend a couple more weeks on this, but
Or years, or
or
years.
years, right? We're still learning, even ourselves, for people who have decent form,
Yeah.
right? Oh man, but no, I appreciate this, man. I learned some new things that I feel like still. I mean, these conversations could be done in a Netflix series. Like, there's so much nuance you can go into each one of these. So I really appreciate you taking the time to just go into some really cool cues and some different ways of initiating these lifts and some individual variation for how people can kind of get themselves set up, or for coaches to help their clients get set up into a good position, man.
Yeah, as they say, the devil's in the details, and I say this as a kind of a call to action for all fitness professionals: is we have no excuse to not be great at the science. It's out there, right? It's not like you had to be the best in the world to become a trainer. The
No,
doorway it was pretty big and not that hard to walk through. But if you want to be great and you really want to impact people's lives and change people's lives, you have to be willing to be the student of the hard and boring, because when you do master it, and it's a journey, it's arduous, and I'm still learning things too, but like, to where I'm at now, I can problem solve for just about anyone I meet, because I understand at the deepest level what's going on in the body, what type of forces are happening. And I don't need to write a peer reviewed paper to prove that. I just got to go out there and help people every single day. And even just from the course, I had 4 people have been messaging me, sending me their videos. Like, this is one person hadn't back squatted in 2.5 years, and they did it without pain for the first time.
That's
And it's
amazing.
like that's why we do this, though. I say
Yes.
that not to pat myself on the back. It's the call to action to say that there is very few things more powerful. I know we like to get abs on people, and we want to help people get laid, and we want to help people feel good about themselves walking down the beach. Sure.
Yes.
But when you take someone who has been told they can't, or feels like they can't, or has pain that tells them they can't, and you revert that and you make it go bye bye, and then you replace pain with strength, that's the power, man. That's why we do what we do. That's why I still do what I do. I've burnt out more times than I can count. But what brings me back and keeps me in the game and keeps me passionate is when that moment happens in a session where somebody goes, that is the first time X, Y, or Z happened without pain. All right, I'm in the right place.
Kevin, I'm gonna take this recording of like that last minute there, and that's gonna be my alarm clock waking up every day because I'm fired up, man. I love that,
Yeah.
dude. But that's so true.
Yeah.
It's like it's the little, I shouldn't call them little, but it's the stories like that that like make the 6 a.m.s worth it, that make the burnout worth it, that make the, queuing someone for the 100th time to bend your knees and all those little things. Like any job, there's ups and downs, but when you have a moment like that,
Mm-hmm.
man, it's one of the sweetest things in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, I finished on this. Life, this is how I live. It's a little bit philosophical, but I think it's a good segue. Is life is only 2 things: the monotony and the moments. But you have to master the monotony to really enjoy the moments. And so, sitting in your house on a Saturday and studying another certification, or spending your lunch break and instead of relaxing and playing a game on your phone or watching YouTube and reading a couple articles on what some peers and pros are doing, that's the monotony that when you master it. And it's also the 6 a.m. session with the healthy client, and the 6 p.m. and the 8 p.m. and the 9 p.m. and the 2 in the afternoons and the meetings and the this and the that. And you get so good at the monotonous that when the moment comes, you bathe in it, they bathe in it, and it's meant to be what it is. And I think far too often we try to jump moment to moment in this effort to be happy and fulfilled and satisfied at all times, which obviously is a good goal
Mm-hmm.
for all humans on earth. But especially if you're in a service profession, you got to realize some clients are going to be annoying, some clients are going to be late. Some clients are going to be so type A, they give you anxiety. Some clients, you're going to feel like you have to hit with a cow prod just to make them stretch. But for every one of those tough clients, there's one that when you enter their life, you are quite literally a turning point in not just their life, but their parents' life and their children's life and their
Yes.
future spouse's life. You quite literally take a person who is on one track and go boop and send them in another better, more empowered place. And that's the moment that makes all the monotony worthwhile.
Man, fired up, dude. That is awesome. Like I said, dude, thank you so much for coming on here to drop these knowledge bombs and the inspirational quotes and just the CT Fletcher S motivational, speaking. I appreciate that so much, man. Can you let
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude, we'll have to do this again sometime for sure to talk about other things as well. Can you let people know where they can find you if you want to plug any social media, any maybe conferences you're doing or anything like that where people can find you?
So I'm at Kevin Mullins Fitness on Instagram. That's also my website, so kevinmullinsfitness.com. A lot of articles, a lot of links to articles, a lot of writing on there, as well as a link to my paperback book, Day by Day, The Personal Training Blueprint. I am everywhere and anywhere with Get PPSC, Pain Free Performance Specialist certification. I am a master instructor for Axiom Fitness Academy in Boca, where we certify you. We get you ready to go and start your career. So if you're listening to this and you want to be a trainer now, come see us. We'll get you on the speedy path. And then I will be probably making more appearances on local TV here soon. I finally found my contact in the Miami market. So I had contacts in the DC market, but I had to spend some time. So hopefully you guys one day will be making your coffee and eggs and be like, hey, wait, I know that guy.
Hey, very exciting, man. I'll be looking forward to seeing that part. But of course, I always make sure to put all those links down in the description for y'all so you can check out Kevin. And definitely on Instagram, he's got really, really cool content. So please be sure to check that out. Y'all know where to find me. It's the same as always at the_shift_method, primarily on Instagram, but a little bit on TikTok. Still got merchandise, still got t-shirts, shorts, bottles, you name it. We probably got it at theshiftmethod.org/store. Of course, I got still couple 8 a.m. spots left. So if you're in the Boca Raton, South Florida area and you want to do some training out at Johnny O's Gymnasium, message me on Instagram or head to theshiftmethod.org and click any of those take action buttons. Kevin, appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful night. All right.
Absolutely.
Later, everyone.